Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from the Singapore Fintech Festival. I'm joined by Dr. Sabrina Tachdjian. She is the head of Fintech and Payments Fund at the HBAR Foundation. We're here to discuss unlocking the potential of CBDCs. Sabrina, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
You got it. What are some areas that can be prioritized in the U.S. to transform the digital asset space?
That's a great question. The U.S. has a lot going for itself. I mean, traditionally it was very strong in that space with great cryptographic minds, with strong entrepreneurs with access to VC capital, and of course this is where a big part of capital markets are at. So a lot going for itself. I think what is holding back the U.S. currently is a lack of regulatory clarity. And if you look at other countries, there are some that, for example, we're here in Singapore, that have been very proactive in terms of coming out with the regulations that are focused on digital assets. If I was to cite the chief legal officer from Ripple from earlier this year, when prompted to give some advice to entrepreneurs in the space, he said, essentially, stay out of the United States because there's not enough clarity. Go to places where there are rules, not to places where there are no rules, but places where there are rules, and Singapore is one of them. You can see Europe also making some strides, the Middle East as well as Hong Kong. So I would hope for the US to actually do more in that space.
What can we learn from the recent success that Singapore has had in trialing a wholesale CBDC? What do you think the US could learn?
Yeah, so I think what's great is to see the engagement with the private sector as well. They're building together and trialing CBDCs in a wholesale, both also cross-border currently, so they're trying multiple iterations, trying different technologies. They're also interested in the retail sector with the purpose-bound money, with Orchid, which is also an ongoing project. So trying all sorts of different use cases and trying to see what works, and also helping shape the thinking and the knowledge in that space.
What about privacy concerns, particularly as it relates to the consumer?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jill, because it's on everybody's mind. You know, what will the future of money look like, and will there be a surveillance state? Is that going to enable that? So I think it's also very top of mind with central bankers worldwide. They want to make sure that data privacy is respected and that consumers are protected. And there are ways, actually technical ways, to get around these kind of concerns. So for example, I don't know if you're familiar with zero knowledge proof. That's a cryptographic method that allows you to prove that a transaction is legitimate without sharing the underlying information. So ZKP for short, if I was to use that, for example, I can prove that I'm over 18 years old, but without sharing my birth date. So that could be applied to CBDCs potentially to create some privacy. It can also be baked in by design. So if you look at what the Bank of Sweden has been doing in their e-krona trials, what they did is they kind of replicated a two-tier system with the banks as one tier. And the central bank is only exposed to information on a need basis, but everything else is mainly managed by the banks.
You know, it's interesting having covered global fintech conferences. We take it for granted in the U.S. that we have legacy financial institutions, but CBDCs, part of the attraction is that they can help to bank the unbanked, because there are billions of people who don't have the service that we take for granted in the U.S. The banking system just doesn't exist.
And you're right, Jill, it's 1.4 billion people that are not in a traditional financial system. So, and of course it touches emerging economies more than more mature economies. It touches women more, the youth, those who live in rural areas, and also those who are not in formal employment. So there's a strong gap to bridge here, and I think the promise of CBDCs is you could, take a newborn baby in an area that has very little connectivity and access to financial services. As soon as this baby is registered, the central bank could issue an account, could open an account for them automatically, and that could follow that person throughout their life, through getting educational subsidies, through getting medical benefits, through getting retirement benefits and such. It's important because access to credit is also denied to people who do not have, who are not part of the financial ecosystem. So you could create financial inclusion by design using CBDCs.
Right. Well, I mean, you were even seeing use cases where it can be used for microfinancing. So you're seeing, the local economies growing, which I think is an interesting use case. Let's talk about HBAR and how it provides infrastructure for a variety of these projects.
Right, so we're very active in that space. We're supporting projects in the CBDC space as well as stablecoin space. In the CBDC space, we're working with a startup called MTech, which is an American startup, and they're working in a variety of areas. They're working with the Digital Dollar Project. They've done some work with Haiti. They're currently engaged with the Bank of Ghana, as well as several central banks in the West African region. So they have an API-based platform that's very modular and it runs on Hedera. We also work in the stablecoin space, which is also quite complementary. So we've recently released an open source stablecoin toolkit for issuers. So it's essentially a turnkey solution where you can, as an issuer, you can just use that very easily to build your own stablecoin. So it's a product that's free to use and it's been trialed by a number of banks. It's been used, for example, for trialing for cross-border payments,
right.
Cross-border solution. And those are it's very expensive to send money overseas, right? With this trial, we found out that you could perform that transaction in about 5 seconds for a few cents. And putting that in the hands of people who may be sending money home every month on their hard-earned salary, that we really think that would make a difference.
All right, Sabrina, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from Singapore. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.